Hi everyone, my name is Craig Garenti from Palisade Compliance, and today I want to talk to you about how to license Oracle in a virtualized environment. Specifically, how to license it when you're using VMware. Now this, unfortunately, is one of the most confusing areas for customers. And the reason it's confusing is because Oracle makes it confusing, of course. They've chosen not to put terms and conditions and agreements that would clarify everything. In addition to being confusing, doing it wrong is potentially very risky. Risky meaning it could cost you a lot of money to do it wrong. So you want to make sure you follow the steps we've outlined here. The flip side of that is, because it's not in your agreement, there is tremendous opportunity for customers, Oracle customers who are well-versed and educated on the subject to do things right and to get the most out of their VMware software running Oracle without paying too much for the Oracle software. So lots of risk, lots of opportunity, lots of confusion. But here we want to talk to you about what are the 4 things that you can do to cut through all of that and chart the best path for your company. First, and I'm going to start here like I start with almost every discussion, is what's in your contract. Most Oracle contracts do not have anything specifically that talks about virtualization. If you have an Oracle contract with language in there about deploying in a virtualized environment, whether that's on-prem or cloud, that's a great place to start and really review that. If you don't have that language in there, you could always get it in there with your next purchase. So there are ways to negotiate those things in there, but most companies don't know to do that, and Oracle isn't very likely to grant those language concessions to you. They call them concessions. They're not really concessions. They're just clarifications so everyone knows the same rules. And but you can get them in your agreement. So first start there. If there's nothing in your contract, that talks about virtualization, you do have a processor definition, and it talks about licensing Oracle software where it's installed and or running. And of course, installed and or running is also not defined in your agreement, which brings up the opportunity of you determining what installed and or running means. The other thing that's in your contract is something we call the entire agreement clause. Basically says that nothing else applies except this document and all the URLs that are contained in it. And of course, what does Oracle do? They create policy documents that say they're not part of the contract, they're for educational purposes only, they could change at any moment, and then they try to impose those documents on you. And you're not going to let them do that here. So step 1, review your contracts. Once you review your contracts, you'll know your options. Meaning, is it defined in the contract? No? Okay. Well then, maybe you license it basically only on the processors on which it's running. Maybe you license the entire server on which the processors are located. Maybe you want to license the entire cluster or the entire vCenter. So you have the world of options open to you should you go down that path. And it's really up to you to determine, if you want to license where you have to, if you want to choose a license path where you have to license everything, like all your vCenters, get used to the Oracle ULA, because you're going to be signing that and probably be signing a perpetual ULA. There's good things about that, right? You don't have to worry about this anymore in terms of these products. If you're using other products, you have to worry about it. You're also going to pay Oracle a lot of money. Oracle ULAs and perpetual ULAs are the most expensive way to license Oracle software. There's a reason why Oracle loves them. Now, if you're going to go the other direction and just license the physical cores on which the software was running, like what it says in your contract, installed and running, there's a methodology, and you're going to have to get prepared for that too. So it's really, where do you want to be on that spectrum of licensing? But don't answer that question yet, because we need to get to question 2. The second thing you need to understand is your virtualization. What are you using? Earlier versions of VMware, Oracle would say, and again, none of this is in your contract, that you have to license this much. Later versions, they say this much. The latest versions, you have to license everything. So you really want to understand what versions of VMware you're using, what your path will be in the next 2 or 3 years with those products. And whatever versions you're using, you definitely want to keep meticulous records. You want to be able to show regularly that your Oracle was confined to something, was confined to that server, to those cores, to that vCenter, to that cluster, whatever you think is best for you. And you might want to run reports based on all those parameters so you can see what your license exposure or opportunity is. So keep meticulous records. The other part of the knowing your virtualization is, Oracle again has some non-public interpretations. We talked about that a few seconds ago, where they think you need to license more based on the later versions of VMware that you may be using. None of that is made public. Palisade, we know these things because, well, we used to be at Oracle, but really because we see how Oracle treats their customers in audits and the information they're requesting and sort of the concessions that we're able to extract from Oracle in terms of virtualization. So really understand your virtualization, how are you using it, and keep meticulous records. So once you know your contracts and what your options are, and you're knowing your virtualization, and you understand where you want to be in terms of your relationship to Oracle, do we want to do everything Oracle says? Are we willing to just fight for what's in our agreements? Then you pick your position. Are you going to license the entire vCenter? Are you going to license the cluster? Are you going to license just the physical cores? Right? So you want to have that position. And then the final thing, the fourth and final thing is, you want to have a plan on how to deal with Oracle. Right? If you've decided you're going to license everything, every vCenter, you need a plan to go out and get that ULA. You need to give Oracle some money there if you don't have one already. If your plan is, I'm only going to license the cluster on which Oracle is licensed, then you need a plan. You need to make sure you have the right records in place so that you can show them to Oracle when need be. But here's the key to having a plan with Oracle. When Oracle knocks on your door, not if, but when they knock on your door, because they always knock on your door for any type of licensing issue, how do you manage that communication? Oracle is going to want you to tell them a lot of information, how you're using Oracle, what vCenters, run these reports, give us this data. But you need to do something else. You need to go to Oracle and say, well, I'm happy to do that. It's your IP. I get it. But what are the rules? What licensing rules are we going to apply here? Show me in the contract where it says what I need to license, because I've heard cores, I've heard clusters, I've heard servers, I've heard vCenters. Show me in the contract. And that's where Oracle has no answer, right? They can't show you in the contract unless, of course, it is in the contract. And that's where you're going to push back on Oracle. And if you can do that first and have that conversation, Oracle audits and Oracle licensing discussions, it's interesting the way Oracle does it. They're very easy in the beginning, and then you have the hard conversations at the end, right? So it's very easy to give Oracle information, and then boom, they hit you in the end with a huge non-compliance finding. At Palisade, we like to have those hard conversations right up front. Before we start sharing information, we all need to be playing by the same set of rules, whatever they are. So have those conversations first. Force Oracle to admit there's nothing in the agreement. Force Oracle to admit that there's room for interpretation, and then you'll be fine the rest of the way, assuming you've done the other things that we recommend. Now, obviously, this is not something that software asset managers are used to, where the answer depends on sort of what your position is and what you want it to be. Normally we want to know there's 10, there's 20, there's 30, whatever the specific number is. And like I said, unfortunately, that's not the case here. So it really does take some leadership internally for your organization to pick a strategy and to execute on that strategy and to defend your strategy. Given the nature of how Oracle does this with their customers, this is one area we highly recommend. You get some assistance, hopefully from Palisade Compliance. We do have some other resources on our website, white papers and case studies that you can look at, and we hope that helps you. If you need direct assistance, please reach out to us, info@palisadecompliance.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you. We'd love to help you understand your position with Oracle and how best to defend it. We've been doing this for a long time, so give us a call. In the meantime, good luck with your virtualization strategy, everyone, and good luck with Oracle.